Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for what will now be the 26th of August, a very late one for me, or 2024. If you don't know what the lines on my map mean, please check out the key to the map on the screen at the moment. Now, my mapping, I've been away on holiday for some time, and so I was unable to do any mapping over that whole period, so 2.5 weeks pretty much of no mapping. Then yesterday I updated Andrew Perpetua's map, and they are the blue lines on my synthesis here, and we have some pins to show some movements in the Russian favor in two areas of the front line for Andrew Perpetua. And then today JR awesomely updated the Surat maps lines for all of the synthesis that you have here, but there are no pins for Surat maps because we just gone for the whole lot. There you go, that's what it is at the moment. What it previously was 2.5 weeks ago for me. So we're only going to look at the Andrew Perpetua changes. However, if you look at Surat Maps' Twitter feed, there are no maps for today, so it actually looks like he's made no updates so far for individual areas. So it could be that there are no changes to the front line as far as Surat Maps is concerned. I doubt it. There's almost always a change within 24 hours. Right. The only other thing to mention is you can see the occupied territories is a slightly lighter shade of red, a sort of orangey red here on Surat Maps, and these deeper red areas are just existing oblasts in Russia that are filled in. Well, when we go to the Kursk area here, the border is this white line. Ignore this blue line here. It has to be split up into random polygons. But the white line there is the border. And this kind of orangey area is just a sort of region, like just an area of emphasis, of focus for Surat Maps. The change between these two colors means nothing. Okay, it's just the way it is on Surat Maps, and we kind of import that. What we are looking for are the red line here to suggest Surat Maps is Russian defensive line, and the blue line is Andrew Perpetua's idea of the Russian defensive line. You can see there's a big difference here around Malaya Lochnia. We're going to talk about that area in a second, and some other differences, say just north around Kremyanoye here, going up there. So there's a bit difference between Perpetua and Surat Maps, but generally they're in agreement. Give or take, right? A little bit different over here in the eastern area too. We have usefully, thank you to JR, got some pins here to show the destroyed bridges, and we hear news that there is another destroyed bridge. If we go to Null Reports' daily reports on what's going on, I'm going to skim through most of it because actually I shared that with you this morning. Here, the third and final bridge over the same river in the Kursk region has been completely destroyed. There's now no road connection across the river near Karij. Russians did create a pontoon next to it. We have now, this is the bridge we're talking about, Karij. We now have no bridge there. That's been destroyed. So great stuff. Thanks, JR, for adding this feature to the map. We've got the destroyed bridge further along at Zvanoye there, and we have that indicated on the map. So just there, destroyed bridge, and then we have a pontoon bridge further up. Now there are claims that 2 pontoon bridges haven't been destroyed. That's geolocated there, and likewise some of these have sort of satellite photographs to support them. Some of them don't. But anyway, that is let's just see. Yeah, that comes up now. Sometimes you have to press a couple of times for it to go, hello. Yeah, I know what you're doing now. Yeah, not there though. Yeah, so we've got some information on 2 pontoon bridges, but the claim there was there's another pontoon bridge near this destroyed bridge. So we'll see if that's the case. Anyway, this is the area to look out for beneath the river, south of the river, where it looks like the Ukrainians might push in from the east, but of course they can push in from the south and from the west. So yeah, there is indeed this area to consider as well. So as you can see, the border actually goes all the way to here. But if you remember, Tetkino was sort of hammered by aviation strikes, actually, among other things. I think also some HIMARS maybe giving it some attention. The Russians blew bridges along the same river here and retreated themselves to the eastern side of the river. So the Ukrainians, I presume, are just filling in this area themselves now. So this whole area south of the same river is going to be surely an area that the Ukrainians can just move into with relative ease. There are some Russian troops here, supposedly still stuck this side of the river, differing claims from sort of a couple of hundred up to 1,000, but they will have been trying to get back across the river, I would have thought, since the Ukrainians have been blown to bridges. So I don't know how many still remain there. The other thing to look at in this area is the fortifications. And remember, these, you can look at my map, or our map really, every day. It's linked to the mapping. In fact, I think it's linked on all of my videos. So it's open source. You can have a look at it. Now, if we check that, you should be able to see the yellow lines of the fortifications if it responds to me, which it's struggling a bit, my computer today. So they're the fortification lines. You can see the existing ones that were in place prior to the incursion that the Ukrainians were easily able to navigate because the Russians were just simply not prepared. The fortifications might well have been good enough. In fact, we've seen some pretty good footage of some underground tunnels and well-built fortifications that the Ukrainians appear to have been able to relatively easily take control of. But given the surprise attack, the nature of the surprise attack and the overwhelming forces that the Ukrainians used in comparison to the conscripts and border guards that were in place, they were easy to overcome. So the Russians have been busy frantically trying to build fortifications elsewhere. There are a few just around Rilsk maybe, as they try and protect that a little bit, and then south of Lvov, and also, I guess, on the way to Kursk city itself. So if the Ukrainians were to push through here, they'd have a little bit of a harder time around this area. Of course, the Ukrainians are not going to want to overextend themselves. The further they go in this area, the weaker their defences will be if they are then pressured in a counterattack to have to defend what they have taken. So the more success they have could lead to a greater failure in defense. So they need to be careful not to overextend themselves. You might see them extend in only particular areas, like I would suggest around here, where they can use the river as a natural barrier, and then there's a defensive line to fall back on as well if needs be. That's the kind of Kursk area there. Now, there are some claims concerning a few areas here, particularly Malaya Lochnia. So there's a prison here, a women's prison here, that is apparently eventually, it's been fought over for some time. I haven't mentioned it yet, but after 2 weeks of fighting, the Ukrainians have gained control of the Malaya Lochnia prison in Kursk region. And then if you put this into Twitter search, for example, you get Ukrainian army regain complete control of Malaya Lochnia and have penetrated 5 miles to reach Marievka there. So that's the idea that they might have gone a little bit further. I don't know where that next place is that they're talking about, but nonetheless, you get the idea that they are having success around here. Oh, there it is, Marievka. So they could be as far up north as that. But in terms of the prison, there's now satellite imagery to suggest that some of it has been flattened. So geospatial analysis compared to the 21st of August, the buildings south of the 11th Women's Prison are completely levelled, along with the southern half of the prison compound, which was in disrepair. Now, there were claims that they wanted to take control of this because there might have been Ukrainian prisoners there. I don't know if that's true. As you can see, this is going back to the 20th, which is 4 days ago. This morning, we saw the Ukrainian Marder fighting Russian positions into Malaya Lochnia. So it's been a long time in coming, really. They've fought quite hard over this. I believe this town was still controlled by Russia until yesterday when it was assaulted from east and west. That was the time, by the looks of it, where you had confusion over whether the Russians were shooting on their own BMP, I think, in that footage. And then we've got some more from today just here. In Russia's Kursk region, Malaya-Lochnia would be an important village for Ukraine to capture, as it will block one of the main roads to Ukraine held Sujia. The prison is next to the main road, so understandable that Ukrainian troops would want to occupy it, as it has taller buildings and will give them better views. But of course, some of those have been leveled. So that's in this area. There's the prison there, and taking control over that could give them sight with ATGMs and whatnot up this road, but they could already be further up this road, as already indicated by one source. So what else can we learn from Noel Reports' daily report on the Kursk region? Russian forces were ambushed, resulting in over 20 enemy soldiers being captured and the rest eliminated. The operation involved US-supplied M1128 Striker armoured vehicles and a British Challenger 2 tank. So we have heard that the Challenger 2s have been active in the Kursk area. Interesting there. This was carried out by the 82nd Separate Air Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. I've seen a few reports on Challengers in the area. There was an early report from Kursk that one Challenger was destroyed, but the video imagery was not conclusive enough, and I didn't really talk about it. Some people questioning me on that. It's like there are some people calling that into question. So anyway, there might have been a Challenger 2 lost. Roman Alekin, a well-known Russian Z blogger, bluntly tells residents of 4 districts in the Kursk region that if they don't evacuate in time, Putin's army will turn them into dust with a counteroffensive when that will happen. Wow. So you've got a Russian mill blogger saying, guys, our own guys, get out, like civilians, get out the area, because if you're not out there, Russia are just going to flatten it. Make of that what you will. So anyway, that's Kursk. That's what's going on there. I don't really have an awful lot of other information concerning the rest of the front line from particular sources. So this is not going to be my usual granular look. I haven't even had time to look at the Institute for the Study of War. So I'll get back into it as the week progresses this week. But just a little note on these 2 areas north of Kharkiv. So if you remember yesterday, I said Andrew Perpetua has shown that the Russians had taken back control over Hlebeke directly north of Kharkiv. I don't think there's been any change there for some time since Kursk has really got into full flow, because the Russians, I think, have taken a number of their troops away from these incursions into Ukrainian territory and pulled them over to Kursk to try and defend Kursk. And that has left particularly this area involved Chansk a little bit vulnerable, and Andrew Perpetua still has the Russians holding on to a small area of the aggregates plant there. Max24 here says Russians remain blocked at the aggregate plant in Vovchansk. Quote, they suffer losses there. They have both dead and wounded. A certain number of Russians remain there. I cannot say the exact number for certain reasons. And that's the spokesman of the OTU Kharkiv, Vitaly Sarantsev. So Ukrainians claiming that there are still some Russians there, but they also include dead and wounded. And that, I mean, yes, that's coming from a Ukrainian source, but the implication here is it's not looking too good for the Russians. And I would imagine this would be a pretty sensible place to withdraw troops from for the Russians. I mean, this was a kind of added bonus for the Russians to try and, you could argue, do similar things that the Kursk incursion is doing for the Ukrainians, right? And so if you're going to take troops away from anywhere, well, the existing front lines on here are probably more important to keep hold of than that kind of extra that you had taken into Kharkiv in the north there. So it is, my opinion is, it's fairly understandable that the Russians would be taking troops away from there. Okay, no changes to Andrew Perpetua's front lines in the whole of the northeastern sector. I just want to point out this area around where it's Krokmalna and Tabaivka here, where the Russians had attacked, and 2.5 weeks of me not doing any mapping had seen significant gains here. Now, Andrew Perpetua yesterday had this gain, and I hadn't done Surat Maps' mapping, and I said that would surely be similar. And as you can see here, Surat Maps has a much more charitable, which is fairly usual for them, being pro-Russian, much more charitable interpretation of the data, showing that, or claiming that, the Russians are much closer to the Oskil River than Andrew Perpetua has them, to the tune of, let's have a look, about to almost 3 kilometers. So that's actually quite a sizable difference between the mappers there. Now, my suggestion would be that the Russians may have got there in an attack on vehicles, but this would probably be grey zone. Just getting there doesn't mean you control it. Often you get an attack, repelled, attack, repelled, attack, repelled, but each time you might drop off a few people, and then after a week you actually do have control of this. Whereas the first attack signifies for Surat maps that the Russians control it straight away, and that's very rarely the case. Anyway, that's one of the main areas of change over the 2.5 weeks that I was not mapping. There, a little bit up here as well. This was a couple of fields there that the Russians had taken control of, and then various changes on the way down. We had a counterattack just north of Makivka here, so this should be, if my memory's correct, yeah, Makivka, and you've got a counterattack from the Ukrainians taking about 2 square kilometers here and taking a large number of casualties from the Russians, which is good news. But yeah, other than that, not a great deal of change to the Terny-Torska area. Russians possibly, is it right that they've moved a little bit further to the west here towards Terny than before I went on a holiday? I don't know. But yeah, interesting to see the sheer scale of the fortifications built into the forest here. I mean, Brady Afric, who I think is the guy that's done all of this data for the fortifications, has done an amazing job to map all of these. Quite incredible. Anyway, as we come down to the area north of Solidar, remember Andrew Perpetua had Rozdalivka very much under this whole area was something that happened over the last few weeks. Interesting that Surat Maps isn't quite as charitable for the Russian gains there as Andrew Perpetua. Because I've got those pins showing up there, it also shows these pins. These are the pins for the bridges along the Donbass Canal here, and also the culverts. Now, interesting that I noted the surprise that the Russians hadn't really taken too much of Chaziv Yar, and I think they've had some troops withdrawn from Chaziv Yar to go and support up in Kursk as well, and that's why Chaziv Yar has remained fairly much under control of the Ukrainians. And actually there's a significant difference between the two mappers here. And Andrew Perpetua has the Russian lines more solidly behind the canal here. This is probably grey zone as the Russians are fighting for these first streets of Chaziv Yar proper. Surat Maps has that under Russian control more significantly. I don't know whether they have withdrawn from there given the Kursk situation, so be interesting to see exactly what is going on in Chaziv Yar these days. And then when we come further to the south, you can see that both of them agree broadly that the Russians have had some major successes around Toretsk and New York. Slight difference north of New York between the Toretsk New York sectors, with Andrew Perpetua less charitable than Surat Maps for the Russian defensive line there. Okay, then when we come on to Pokrovsk region, here we have the first changes to the mapping for Andrew Perpetua today, and you can see quite significant gains for the Russians west of Orlivka and Sehivka there, going on the way towards Novohrodivka and further up the railway line towards Pokrovsk. So Pokrovsk, the Russians are getting closer and closer. They seem to be going southwesterly, in a southwesterly direction. But yeah, taking also some of Novohrodivka itself, with this area being gained by the Russians in the last 24 hours, according to Andrew Perpetua. So that's your first main change for the mapping today. No change in Krasnohorivka, Pervomaisky, Karlivka areas. Mariinka 2, that stayed the same according to Andrew. And then when we get further to the south in this area that I was saying is a bit of a worry, I was saying this yesterday, well, it looks like the Russians are making further gains towards this road, and they really have, properly interdicted it. Now, I'd imagine that it's fully under fire control. You're not going to be driving from Konstantinivka to Vuhledar as a Ukrainian anymore. And that means that this could be this slow, painful capture of Vuhledar, to be honest, because now they get onto the high ground and move further to the southwest and can take Vuhledar from the northeast, whereas previously they were trying to take it from the south and that was going uphill. This is on high ground, but getting onto this road, which is on equally on the high ground, is one way around the problem of striking from Pavlivka to the south. So this is a problem. Konstantinivka is a problem because really it's you are spelling the end of this whole area, which is useful. It gives the Ukrainians the ability to strike Mariupol with HIMARS. I don't know if you can strike the 84-kilometer HIMARS anymore if they lose that area of land. So that is going to be a shame for them. So let's just measure that distance. So if you put HIMARS there, you can. That's 88 kilometers. So, and that's not quite getting to the coast itself. And that would be placing the HIMARS in a pretty risky situation, really. I guess if you have a HIMARS there, if you're risking it, you can still reach pretty much the center of Mariupol. So this is why taking this whole area protects Mariupol. That's why it's so important. And also, that road was, when the front lines were back here in the white line. So that white line is the front line for the Russian defensive line, from May last year, May the 30th, 2023. And taking all of this land, I think, is significant. And this road would have been able to be used previously. Now it's just really out of bounds. So that's the other area of Russian success. No changes elsewhere. These rumors are still floating around as to the Ukrainians mounting forces in the Zaporizhia area, mounting forces possibly for an attack on Kimbern Spit. Just here, and the other spit further to the south, which is, I think, Tendrinska Spit there. So there have been previous, if you remember some months back, there was a special forces attack here that was a disaster. It was seen, and a lot of Ukrainian special forces died in that attack, and that was not good. There have since been some attacks on to the Kimbern Peninsula or Kimbern Spit. There was a few weeks back. While I was on holiday, I think there was a special forces attack that also quite a few Ukrainians perished on that attack, but they also did destroy quite a lot of stuff there. So it was a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And then there have been strikes on the Kimbern Spit quite consistently for the last couple of weeks from a distance, probably drone, certainly artillery, and maybe rocket strikes. But this is all pointing towards a possible shaping of this whole region. You've had hits also on occupied territories, on the left bank of the Dnipro River. Are the Ukrainians looking at attacking across the river, or are they wanting to make the Russians think they're going to attack across the river? Because if the Russians think that the Ukrainians are going to attack here, or indeed up in Zaporizhia, as there are some people claiming, or indeed up in Bryansk region. Sorry, my map's really struggling today. One of the other rumors is that they're going to attack up into Bryansk, or maybe into Belgorod. Then the Russians have to think, well, should we keep people back here just in case that's going to happen? All these rumors are flying around. All those people that you're keeping back just in case are people you could otherwise be throwing into Pokrovsk or to defending Kursk. So this kind of psyops, what I think is probably psyops, is probably the case that the Ukrainians do not have the capacity to attack in any more places than they presently are, or certainly, not to the degree that they would require to take, if you're going to attack here in Kimbern and Kherson, get across the Dnipro to try and take ground all the way to Crimea, you're going to need 40,000 troops to do it, 50,000, that's not something you're going to do with 4 brigades, right? So they might be amassing, scare quotes, amassing some elements of forces in a few of these places, but it's not enough to do what some people claim might be on the cards. And I just think it's more likely that there's psyops going on, or very localized attacks might take place. That will still keep the Russians having to play whack-a-mole with not enough hammers. So yeah, that's just my thoughts, is that the main operations you're going to see are going to be in Kursk, and surely they need to sort of rotate their troops in some of these fairly desperate areas the Ukrainians has. Anyway, that's my rambling assessment. As the week goes on, I'll get more and more into the mapping zone and have a better handle of what's going on, but hopefully that's okay for you for the time being. Don't forget, there's ATP Distilled linked below, where you can check out all these summaries, the AI transcribed summaries of my videos, in case you don't have time to listen to them or are unable to listen to them being at work or something. So you can always read videos that you miss, and it just summarizes it into chapters, really quick reads for you. Please check ATP Distilled out that Benny Pide's been working on. Thank you for JR, who's been helping out with the mapping today. So awesome stuff. Anyway, guys, take care. Speak soon.